Freddy vs. Jason was a 2003 horror movie directed by Ronnie Yu, written by Damien Shannon and Mark Swift, and produced by Sean S. Cunningham. It was distributed by New Line Cinema. This movie starred two of the most infamous horror icons, Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, pitted against each other after Freddy has been forgotten by everyone in Springwood and deploys the help of Jason. The movie had a soundtrack released in 2003 by Roadrunner Records and consisted of 20 tracks. Today I'm here to review the first half of the album. Like the honorable album that I just reviewed, this one has quite a bit of variety, but we'll see which soundtrack is the superior one. Starting off, we have How Can I Live by Il Nino. This one was the first track I found off the album. It was recommended to me one day and was the sole inspiration for me wanting to review this album. This one kind of gives me a Disturbed Prayer vibe, as well with the Mudvayne vibe. And to me, this is probably the best song off the album. And we'll see if this one can be beat by any of the other songs. Next up, we have When Darkness Falls by Killswitch Engage. This one was an iffy one for me. I'm not really too much of a huge fan of the metalcore genre. I haven't really had too much experience with this genre, but this one was a good song. I liked the chorus as well with the drums, and it gave me a sulfur vibe, which was a song written and released by Slipknot that appeared on the All Hope Is Gone album. So kind of made the song a bit better after that, and honestly is arguably one of the best songs on the soundtrack in my opinion. Next up, we have Beginning of the End by Spineshank. This is a band I've heard of before. I don't think I've heard much of the music, but like the other two, this one was pretty great. It gave me a Mudvayne and Linkin Park vibe. Love the drums on this one, and this one is definitely a favorite of mine, but not as much as How Can I Live. Next up, we have Sun Doesn't Rise by Mushroomhead. Like Spineshank, this is a band I've heard of before, but I haven't heard too much of this stuff, so I wasn't expecting to like this one as much, but like the others, this was probably one of the better tracks on the album. And a definite 5 in my opinion. I wasn't expecting it to be all that good, but I was pleasantly surprised. Next up, we have Condemned Until Rebirth by Hatebreed. This one was kind of disappointing. Now, the only really good thing I can say about this song is that one of the lyrics reminds me of Metallica's Unforgiven 3, as there's a lyric similar to that one, which kind of brought a bit of joy when I found it out. Other than that, this one is a pretty okay song, which is kind of disappointing, because the others before this were pretty good, and the other songs were somewhat decent after this one. Next, we have Snap from Slipknot. It was only a matter of time before we had a Slipknot song on a soundtrack like this. Now, this one is a pretty decent song. It's not my favorite song from them, but I do give the album props because they could have just used one of more well-known songs rather than this one. So props for them for using a song that doesn't seem to be relatively known. And also, this one is not the usual Slipknot song. So that was another pretty good thing about it. Next up, we have Army of Me by Chimera. This one is another okay song. I did like portions of this song, but not as much as the others. And for me, it doesn't really kind of leave a lasting impression. So it's kind of a free for me. Next up, we have the After Dinner Payback from Autumn to Ashes. This one was kind of another disappointment, if I'm being honest. From the name alone, I was expecting a kind of a song fitting in another genre, but this one was just kind of disappointing with almost anything about that. It's not bad, it's just, it's one that you could just skip through and you wouldn't be missing anything. Although I wouldn't recommend it, I actually recommend listening to all the songs on this one because you might find something you might like. Next up, we have Bleach by Seven Dust. Seven Dust was another band I wasn't as familiar with. I did hear about them quite a few times, but I never got around to listening to them. So this is probably the first song I heard from them, and well, my impression of it was that it makes me want to listen to the rest stuff. It's a pretty decent song. And of course, at this time I was losing hope on a soundtrack because the few songs before it weren't, well, that great. Mainly tracks 7 and 8. Next up, we have Bombshell by Powerman 5000. The final song on the first half of the album. This one was a pleasant surprise. I never heard this one before. I mean, I only knew two songs from this band, being this one and When Worlds Collide, but they never really gave me too much of an impression to listen to. But after I listened to this one, I kind of had to listen to it again. It was just that good of a song. Although I still think When Worlds Collide is still my favorite song. But this one was pretty good one. So, yeah, that's what my opinion is on the first half. Next week, I'll be covering the second half of the album. So, initial thoughts on it? Well, I think the Underworld soundtrack is a little better. I mean, the first half of this one is pretty great, but from what I'm feeling so far, the first half of the Underworld album, I kind of feel is a little better. Of course, that's not meant to stop anyone from listening to this one. If you're actually interested in this album, I do heavily recommend this one. There's a few duds on this one, but after listening to this soundtrack, I feel like this one's probably one of the better ones I found. So, yeah, listen to it if it piques your interest. And for now, goodbye.